think the Bible is like a good barometer to develop a moral compass, but it also can't be taken too literally. Because I would always argue, like, how do we determine, the Bible is a man-made thing, right? Like, there were men who came around and kind of talked about their experience with God, right?
Not really. I think the Bible has multiple kind of sections.
Right, in terms of just books.
It's like history, prophetic work, a little bit more history.
Yeah.
And then
How-tos.
Yeah.
So everything in the Old Testament is specifically, technically just for Jewish people.
Yeah.
And then everything in the New Testament is like, Jesus came as like, I'm fulfilling all the things that were talked about then to give like life to all people in this life and the next.
Yeah, because it was basically just like most monotheistic religions came from Judaism, basically. So,
yeah.
or at least take some parts of Judaism, basically.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about the Bible as like a whole, like, yes, are there some good things in there? Sure, 100%. I read it. But now you have to look at it like, it's not just like a how-to book. It's like a congruent story over the course of 2,000 years. And it's like, it is really impressive that 40 people who never met each other could all write about the same thing in a way that makes sense years apart over the course of 2,000 years. So that is why a lot of people, and I would subscribe to this myself, would say that God, while being God, has the power to influence people to do things that he wants if they are open to it. Because all these people chose to serve and love God. And it's like, there is literally no other book in existence, no other religious book, no other regular book, that somehow 40 different authors shared one congruent story about the same being, and then that same being, who, and this is where Jesus comes in, one guy happened to fulfill hundreds of prophecies about a book that was existing long before he ever existed.
Well, the only thing they, real quick before you go, the only thing they really agree with is just that Jesus existed, which means that just a person named Jesus existed. But go ahead.
Who is it? Who is it?
In terms of just the 40 people you're referring to, in terms of like whether it's Matt, the disciples, or the people who created it, because they all have different views on what was said.
I would have never met Jesus, or like had any reason to like know like Jesus was actually going to come. They can only have faith that like, okay, we're going to get a savior. And like Jewish people today are still waiting on the savior if they don't believe it's Christ.
Were you going to say something?
So, yeah, something that I was thinking about was, how did the chapters get passed on? Like when Matthew was done writing his chapter, did he give the rest to Mark? Like physically?
So each of them like
because then that would answer the question of like, well, of course he knew the same story because he got the book passed over to him and read it.
He just added more.
So each of them wrote like,
how did it get put together?
Each of them wrote like separate stories. So it'd be the same as like, we are all sitting in this room and we leave and go talk about what we did here today. And we would all tell semi-similar stories from different perspectives.
So then who's the guy that put it all together for us then?
In about...
Like, who was keeping... Was there like someone that was like, all right, Joe, you done with your chapter? All right, give it to me. Like, who was holding the document?
So at some point, like in like Eastern countries, like people, when churches first formed, like people would put together like documents and keep them for the church. And then I want to say it's the 1600s, this could be wrong, but then like a group of like prayerful people came together and over the course of like months put what they think is the like biblical canon based on like prayer and like reading the Bible. And
so it's all man-made. It's developed by men who decided, okay, let's choose these things and throw it into a Bible.
I think if you don't believe that God has the power to influence people in any capacity to do what he wants, yes, it's completely man-made. I think if you believe that like the creator of all things is capable of using people to do what he wants, then it's God using people. But
does God also use people to kill people?
I think God has the capacity to do whatever he wants.
Okay, so is that good or bad?
Because there's a story I forgot where they like take over some camp.
Yeah.
That's it's just like, probably
like I learned this in Bible study or
but
something.
yeah, they like tell like, hey, go take over that, like that's your land and
the promised land.
Them, you know?
So I think there's definitely like war and like fighting in the Bible. I don't think that's something to be like dismissed, but it's like we are, this concept of like, are we sinners? Like we are already in sin. Like there's no way to like avoid it per se. So it's like God can have someone like do what they would do anyways, and like then we blame God for saying like, oh, like why did you have that person do that? But it's like God is able to act on his creation however he wants. And like we can either continue to view God like as we think in terms of like, well, if I was God, I wouldn't do that. When it's like, in the end, we're not God. So then how could we speak on what's the way to run the universe?
Well, then how did Jesus speak on it? How did Matthew speak on it? How did anybody in the Bible speak on it?
How did Jesus speak on which part?
On any part of what he believed God
But
wanted
Jesus
for
was
people.
God.
Okay, so if we believe Jesus, okay, so remove Jesus. Let's talk about Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, anybody else
Matthew,
in the
Mark,
Bible.
Luke, and John.
How do they get to speak on what they believe?
They just told a story. They didn't.
Yeah, but they're not God.
They told the story of Jesus. They didn't say what they thought.
They didn't. Nobody else in the Bible said anything about what they thought.
So like that's the point of like
They said what they experienced from Jesus, right? So they would say this is kind of like their experience of what they.
they wrote down what Jesus said and did in the Gospels specifically.
Okay.
In the Old Testament with Moses, when he came down from the mountain, he had the tablets that would have been directly from God. So, and then anything else would be like everything in the New Testament after the Gospel would be like proper church etiquette, which is more so for people who already believe, not for people who aren't believers, but.
But even them being able to document that, how are they able to document that if they are not God?
Document what?
Any of what Jesus did.
What do you mean?
It's all an interpretation. So if I write down the same way we always talk about how I know Joe different than he knows Joe, than you know Joe, like it's all an interpretation.
Yeah,
So
I think there was some parts where like maybe they were watching stuff go down and they were like writing it down.
Yeah, there are people writing it
Yeah,
down.
but there was some parts where it was I think like God was like speaking through them.
So
Okay.
specifically, like
Okay.
the Gospels, like Matthew, for example, was writing these things down like as they were happening. Mark is like Peter's dictation that he told Mark, and like Peter's telling the story of what he experienced. John was one of his disciples and was actually there, like telling his experience. And then Luke was a doctor, who I forget which disciple, but all of the books are either someone who was there, or like someone wrote down like the experience of someone who was firsthand experiencing it. It's not like they weren't telling like their personal opinion on what happened. It's just like
yeah, but it doesn't. It's not their opinion. You ever played telephone in school growing up? I can tell you one thing, and once 30 people have heard that, I tell it to him. He does it. By the time you get to the 30th person, the sentence is a whole different sentence.
That's what makes the Gospels very compelling. Like the fact that there are 4 separate people who wrote about one thing without conspiring with one another, and it tells the same story of the same guy. That's really impressive. And then on top of that, if we just go zoom outside of the Bible, there's more documentation of those same stories happening that have nothing to do with the Bible.